The men who found it were not looking for it. They were digging under 40 feet of collapsed stone in a city buried since before Rome existed. The year was 1849. The site was Nineveh, on the eastern bank of the Tigris, in what is now northern Iraq. Layard's team had already uncovered 2 palaces, and enough carved reliefs to fill the British Museum's main hall. They thought they were done with surprises. Then the floor opened. Not collapsed, opened. A shaft cut into bedrock, sealed from above with a flat stone plastered over and buried beneath the palace floor. The workman called for Layard. He climbed down himself. What he found was not royal. No thrones, no gold. A record vault, hundreds of inscribed clay tablets arranged in a sequence nobody could read. One took 60 years to translate. When they did, the scholars who worked on it disagreed. 3 went quiet and never published their full interpretations. That tablet has a British Museum catalog number. Almost nobody outside a narrow circle of Assyriology specialists has read a full translation of its reverse face. What that reverse face describes is not myth, not a hymn, not astronomical record. It is a descent report, a technical account of what a group the tablet names as the Nephilim encountered when they dug through 7 levels beneath ancient Mesopotamian ground. Each level documented, each described with measurement notation. And the 7th, the deepest, is where the classification breaks. This is what they found. To understand why that tablet exists, you need to know what Nineveh was. By the time Layard dug it up, the city had been abandoned for over 2,000 years. The Assyrians built their final great palace there under Ashurbanipal king, scholar, and the most obsessive collector of records the ancient world produced. He sent agents across Mesopotamia with one instruction: find every text. Copy everything. If the scribes who hold it refuse, take it anyway. The result was a library of around 30,000 tablets. Most covered administrative matters. But a significant portion covered something harder to categorize: creation texts, ritual sequences, genealogical records tracing ruling lines back to figures described as something prior to men, beings who set the conditions for what followed. The Assyrians did not write these texts. They copied from older Babylonian sources, which were copied from Sumerian originals dating to the 3rd millennium before the Common Era. The scribes marked certain tablets, copied from an ancient tablet. Some noted the original was itself a copy of something older still. The tablet from the sealed shaft was one of the marked ones. Its colophon identified it as a copy of a source text held at Eridu, the oldest city in Mesopotamia by the Sumerian king list's own reckoning. The list says kingship descended from heaven to Eridu first. The scholars noted it and moved on. The tablet's British Museum catalog number is K6634. It is formally classified under the Mul Apin Corpus, a Babylonian astronomical series covering stellar observations and calendrical frameworks. Scholars placed it there because signs on the obverse matched known Mul Apin notation. The reverse face is where the classification breaks down. The reverse of K6634 does not concern the sky. The key term in its opening line is Kigal Sumerian for great below or great earth, the same root used for Ereshkigal, goddess of the underworld. What follows Kigal is a sequence of numbered descent stages, each with measurement notation and a terminus description specifying the condition at that depth. The Sumerologists who translated it used words like layer, level, stratum. One used the term station, a stopping point in a journey downward. There are 7 of these stations on the reverse face, and the 7th carries a notation the others do not, the sign AN, the Sumerian determinative for something divine, something from the sky, something not of the earth in origin. In Sumerian scribal convention, the AN determinative was applied with precision, not freely or poetically. It marked a specific category. Using it to describe something found at the deepest point of a physical excavation, beneath 7 measured levels, is a usage with no parallel in the rest of the Mul Apin corpus. The Nephilim appear by name in the text 3 lines before it. The scribes placed it there deliberately. Quick pause, and this is something new. For the first time since the 12 codes, there's a second document. It's called the Deep Record. Every descent level, the tablet names, matched against the physical strata, and the fully annotated list of what each level was built to contain. Linked below, QR code on screen. That's all back to the video. The word Nephilim appears in Genesis as giants, or fallen ones, beings whose nature the text declines to explain. But the Hebrew is not the source. The Sumerian root is older by at least 1,000 years. The term in K6634's reverse is Naphil, same consonant structure, same conceptual weight, something that descended, something that came down. What the tablet describes reads as record, not allegory. The Nephilim are the agents of the descent. They are the ones doing the digging. And the tablet describes, in the language of a field report rather than a poem, what they encountered at each stage. The Sumerians were precise about categories. They had specific vocabulary for mythological events, for divine actions, for metaphorical language. K 6634 does not use any of those registers on its reverse face. It uses measurement language. Material description language. The language of someone documenting what they physically encountered. This is what the early translators found difficult to place. They had frameworks for mythological texts, for administrative records, for astronomical observations. K 6634's reverse fit none of them cleanly. It read like a site survey, except the agents were beings identified with a term predating the Hebrew tradition by centuries, and what they were surveying was not natural geological formation. Something had been built, something had been placed, level by level, in the earth before the civilizations, doing the surveying existed. The connection to the biblical Nephilim is not incidental. The academic consensus treats the Hebrew account as mythological. But the Sumerian usage predates the Hebrew by enough distance that the direction of borrowing is clear. The Sumerians had the concept first. And in the Sumerian usage, the Nephilim are not supernatural in the sense of being outside physical reality. They operate in physical space. They descend through physical material. They document physical conditions. They return and file a report. That report is K 6634's reverse face. What makes it unusual is not that it describes impossible things. It is that it describes specific things. At this depth, this material. At this depth, this condition. That level of specificity is what made the scholars who worked on it go quiet. The first level is described as the layer of worked stone, compressed, uniform, shaped in a manner the tablet distinguishes explicitly from natural formation. The described characteristics match dressed stone, stone cut and prepared by tool. But the tablet places this layer at a depth far below anything the ancient Mesopotamians themselves quarried. Whatever the worked stone layer is, it was not placed there by the civilization doing the excavation. The second level carries the notation Kelam, place of the living record. The descent agents find materials described as inscribed. The tablet uses the word dub, standard Sumerian for a clay tablet, but specifies these dub are not clay. The material is harder. The markings are not stylus-made. A record-keeping system, already in place, at depth the excavation is only now reaching. The third level is where the language shifts. The scribe introduces a phrase found nowhere else in the Mul Apine corpus. Igigal laba antuku. The German Assyriologist Franz Boll, in 1922, argued the most defensible translation is, sight that does not belong to those who see it. Something at the third level was being observed, or was itself observing, and the Nephilim encountered it without having produced it, without it having waited for them. Bool's private notes describe this station as containing a residue. He did not say a residue of what. The fourth level entry uses the vocabulary of constructed spaces but proportions not scaled for a human body. Width and height ratios consistent with something considerably larger. The tablet marks it with a single determinative, not made here. The fifth level is 3 lines. The agent stopped. The word used implies compulsion. They were prevented from immediate continuation. The reason given is a quality of the air described as sealed breath. They performed a ritual before proceeding. The ritual is not recorded. The sixth level is the longest entry and the most damaged. Roughly 40 signs are lost. What survives describes light, with no listed source, a surface described as responsive to the agent's presence, and a phrase translating as, where the count ends and the original begins. The seventh level is 4 lines. Clear. Consistently translated. A chamber, sealed from below, containing a form placed there before the earth above it existed. The an determinative appears 3 times. The Anunnaki in the Sumerian tradition are not creators of the universe. They are administrators of it. They receive the fundamental orderings that govern existence, and apply them. Their power comes from custody, not origin. The Enuma Elish describes the senior Anunnaki dividing the cosmos, sky above, earth surface, and the Abzu, the freshwater deep beneath the ground. Ea, also called Enki, takes the Abzu, not as punishment but as priority. The Abzu is where wisdom originates, where the formulas for creation are held. The Sumerian hymns to Eridu describe that city as the point where the sacred mound first rose from the waters of the Abzu, the first interface between the deep and the surface. That is where the king list says kingship first descended. That is the city K 6634's colophon names as origin of its source text. In the Sumerian framework, geography and cosmology are the same document at different scales. The Atrahasis epic, the oldest Babylonian flood narrative, embeds a detail most translations skip entirely. When the Anunnaki create humanity to resolve the Igigi labor rebellion, they do not create from nothing. The text says they used something already prepared in the ground, already placed, already waiting before the creation event occurs. What the Nephilim were sent to find was not a treasure. It was a junction, a location where the ordered from below structure of reality is closest to the visible world. The 7 levels are not simply a depth measure, they are transitions, each marking a shift between layers of governing reality from the ordinary material world into something older and more fundamental than the material world itself. At the 7th level, the me do not operate, they originate. The earth formed around what is there. The geological structure the Nephilim descended through was the result of the form having been placed. The material world organized itself around something already present before any of it existed above it. The descent was confirmation, not exploration. The Anunnaki already knew it was there. The Nephilim were sent to verify the form remained in place. The report is K 6634's reverse face. Before we move on to the chamber, stop for a second. What you just heard about the 7th level only makes sense alongside the full descent sequence. The AN notation, the sealed from below detail. It's all in the deep record, linked below. Grab it, come back, what's next builds on it. QR code is on your screen. The chamber. That is what the scribal tradition kept returning to, not the descent, not the 7 levels, but the thing at the bottom. K 6634 is not the only text that references it. The Atrahasis creation section contains a detail most translations skip. When the Anunnaki create humanity, they use something already prepared in the ground, already placed before the creation event occurs. Whatever was in the ground predated both the civilization that found it and the geological formation surrounding it. What survives is the framing, a form, sealed from below, predating the stratigraphy above it. Sealed from below, not from above. The Sumerians were precise about directionality. Sealed from below means the closure mechanism was applied from beneath the chamber or from a position more fundamental than the chamber itself, not locked by someone standing above it and pulling it shut. Closed from the inside or from something deeper still. The tablet specifies the seal carries permanence through an ordering set before the material world formed around it. The Sumerians called this the fundamental rules governing all existence, administered by the gods but older than the gods themselves. Whatever sealed the 7th chamber was sealed by me, not by a physical barrier, by a rule that predates the material it operates on. The Nephilim found it. The tablet says they did not open it. The text does not describe them as physical objects. A minority of Sumerologists, reading the grammar carefully, hold that the Kinsig were not placed by the Nephilim but encountered by them already present at each level, embedded in the structure rather than added to it. On this reading, the descent was also an act of reading, a sequence of signs that had been set before the descent began, built into the thing being descended through. The Nephilim were not exploring unmapped territory. They were following a map that had been constructed for them by whoever designed the 7-level system. The second addendum concerns time. The tablet includes a notation about how long the form at the 7th level had been in place. The time unit used appears in only a handful of other Sumerian texts, always in cosmological contexts, measuring the age of celestial structures, the duration of divine arrangements, never human events or historical periods. A scholar at the Oriental Institute working in the 1960s estimated the unit at roughly 10,000 years per occurrence. The K 6634 notation carries that unit in a sequence that, by this reckoning, produces a figure in the hundreds of millions of years. Whether that number is meant literally or functions as a Sumerian idiom for before reckoning is disputed among scholars. What is not disputed is the choice of a cosmological time unit. Whatever the scribes believed was in the 7th level chamber, they did not believe it had been placed there in human history. They required a unit of time that operates at geological and cosmological scale to even describe how long it had been there. The third addendum is a structured list. 7 entries, 1 per level, each describing the condition of that level after the Nephilim completed their return journey. The first 6 entries use variations of the same phrase, rendered by Sumerologists as sealed or closed or withdrawn from access. Each level, as the agents moved back upward through it, returned to its prior condition of concealment. The passage closed behind them. The seventh entry does not use any sealing phrase. It carries a term meaning open, or accessible, or remaining as found. The chamber at the seventh level did not close after their departure. The tablet ends there. No explanation for why. Just the record that the deepest thing they reached stayed open after they left it. The British Museum received the K6634 tablet in the 1850s as part of the Layard collection. It was assigned a catalog number, placed in storage, and not seriously studied for over 30 years. The first scholar to work on the reverse face systematically was George Smith, the self-taught Assyriologist who discovered the Babylonian flood narrative in 1872 and caused a sensation by showing the biblical flood account had a Mesopotamian predecessor. Smith died in Syria in 1876 at age 36 before completing his analysis of K6634. His notes on the reverse face exist in the British Museum archive. They were never published. The next serious attempt came from Peter Jensen, a German philologist, in the 1890s. Jensen identified the mole-apin classification, but noted, in a private letter preserved in the Marburg archive, that the reverse face was of a different character entirely from the astronomical material on the obverse. He described the descent sequence in general terms and said he intended to return to it. He did not. That letter is the only surviving documentation of his views on the reverse. Franz Boll produced the Igigi Laba Antuku translation in the 1920s. Boll was a careful philologist and a prolific publisher. His work on K6634 appeared in a minor Dutch-language journal and was not picked up by the mainstream Assyriological literature. He continued to reference the tablet in private correspondence through the 1950s, describing it as a text that resists ordinary categories. He never explained which categories he thought did apply. The Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago conducted a systematic re-examination of the British Museum's Mesopotamian holdings in the early 1950s. Their internal notes on K6634, obtained through archival inquiry by a researcher in the 1990s, describe the reverse face in neutral terms: descent sequence, 7-stage structure, terminology requiring further analysis. The notes conclude with a single line: classification deferred. The Oriental Institute's published output from this period does not mention K6634. The pattern that emerges is not a conspiracy. It is something more mundane. A text that does not fit available categories tends to be noted, partially analyzed, and then set aside. Classification deferred. That deferral is now 6 scholarly generations deep, and the tablet remains in the British Museum. What does it mean if K6634 is what the most literal translation suggests? The standard position is that it is mythological text using the language of physical description, that the 7 levels are cosmological metaphor. The Nephilim, a literary device; the 7th level chamber, something theological or psychological. This position is coherent. It fits the framework applied to almost every text from this region and period. The problem is that it requires explaining away technical language the Sumerians applied consistently across their corpus to describe actual physical things. The Sumerians marked mythological language. They had established conventions for indicating that a text was operating in the realm of divine action, spiritual reality, or poetic allegory. K6634's reverse face does not use any of those conventions. It uses measurement language, material description, and the structural format of a field report. The difference between K6634 and a clearly mythological text like the Descent of Inanna is precisely that. Inanna's descent uses the language of myth, and K6634 does not. Taking the tablet seriously as a physical account, not uncritically, but without automatic dismissal, produces a specific set of conclusions. The descent was organized and pre-marked. The thing at the 7th level was placed there before the geological formation surrounding it existed. Whoever placed it expected it to eventually be found. The kin-sig markers exist for a reason. And the access did not close after the Nephilim left. The physical record from Mesopotamia sits alongside this reading in an uncomfortable way. Sumerian civilization appeared without developmental stages. Writing, administrative systems, astronomical knowledge, legal frameworks, mathematical notation, all effectively complete from the earliest documentation, with no gradual emergence. The Sumerians themselves said they received these things. They named who gave them. The genetics of the transition from archaic to anatomically modern human contains a gap. Population modeling has not resolved a period of rapid change without a clear gradual mechanism. The Sumerians had a word for the being created at the transition: Lulu, the primitive worker, made from something already in the ground combined with something brought from elsewhere. K 6634 does not prove any of this. What it does is refuse the framework that makes it impossible. The civilization that wrote it was asking why humans exist, who made them, and what was here before them. The tablet suggests they were not asking from ignorance. They were asking because someone had already shown them part of the answer. Go back to where this started. A shaft cut into bedrock beneath a palace abandoned 1,000 years before the Assyrians built on top of it. A flat stone, plastered over and buried. Inside it, a clay tablet that has been in the British Museum for over 170 years. The men who found it could not read it. The men who eventually could read it found it difficult to categorize. They noted what they saw, recorded what they could translate, and moved on. Classification deferred. That deferral is now 6 scholarly generations deep. The tablet says what it says: 7 levels, worked stone at depths that should not contain it, a record system not made of clay, sight that does not belong to those who see it, a chamber sealed from below, a form placed there before the earth around it existed, an access that did not close. The 7th addendum is explicit. The level retained the state the descent agents found it in after they left, after the source text was copied to Eridu, after Nineveh was buried for 2,000 years, after the British Museum catalogued the tablet and set it in storage. The 7th level stayed open. Archaeology has not answered whether this is literal. It has not seriously asked. The text that raises the question has spent 6 generations under a classification label that functioned as a reason not to look further. The full annotated descent sequence is in the document below every level, every notation, every kin-sig marker. Linked below, QR code on screen. If this is the kind of history they deferred, you should know what it says.